Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live recording of the Creative Confidence Podcast, where we talk to subject matter experts about creativity, leadership, innovation, and growth. I see you all know the drill already. Many of you are already introducing yourselves in the chat, so welcome. If you haven't done it already, please drop your name and where you're calling in from today into the chat. This is like my favorite part of the show. Oftentimes, I see people calling in from like Winnipeg, Toronto. I'm originally from Canada, so I always love watching Canadians show up for the show. People from Sao Paulo, from Glasgow, from Hawaii, from Chennai. Just the global nature of this community always really kind of warms our hearts here at IDEO. So we love seeing all of you here. Thank you for joining us today. Some of you at crazy times of the day. So thank you so much for giving us your time. I'm Matthieu Laurent. I'm your Creative Confidence Podcast host. I'm also the head of new ventures here at IDEO. I know that for some of you who are regular viewers, you'll know that I'm kind of new to the podcast. So if you want to know a little bit more about me, you can check out, I think it's 2 episodes ago, where IDEO CEO Derek Robson turns the tables and interviews me. But today we have an amazing conversation planned for you about tapping into AI to unlock your own creativity. I'm joined by Savannah Kunovsky, IDEO's Managing Director of Emerging Technology, and Matthieu Laurent, the creative leader at Google DeepMind, who's focused on AI and creativity research. Welcome, Matt and Savannah.
Hi, thanks for
Hi.
having me.
So happy to be here.
Really,
Happy to have you.
really excited to have you both here today. We can't wait to dive in. I can't hide it from the audience. We had a lot of trouble narrowing down the topic for today's event because there was really just a universe of things we could be exploring. But before we do that, I do have to share a couple of reminders. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I encourage you to subscribe to the Creative Confidence Podcast on Apple or Spotify, wherever you like to listen. And definitely sign up for the IDEO newsletter to get invitations to future live podcast recordings. As always, we will open up the last portion of our podcast for questions from our live audience. So definitely share your questions in the chat as we are talking. We will get to as many of them as we can. But if you're a regular listener, you know that we often don't get to all of the questions. So we will be sharing a bonus episode with Matt and Savannah to answer even more of the questions than we usually get to. So definitely put them all in there and keep an eye out for both of those episodes in the coming weeks. So today is all about AI and creativity. We're diving into how generative AI is transforming the creative process and what that can mean for you as a leader. We'll talk about how AI can support and supercharge your creative flow, how prototyping with AI is changing the way ideas are brought to life, what it looks like to collaborate with AI, not just as a tool, but really as a creative assistant or partner. And you'll walk away with a deeper understanding of how AI is shaping the future of content and collaboration, tangible ways to start experimenting with AI in your team's creative work, and hopefully some inspiration to lead with curiosity and creativity in this fast-changing landscape. In a moment, I'll hand it over to Savannah and Matt, but first, I'd like to do a quick introduction of these two folks. Savannah, as I mentioned, is the managing director of IDEO's Emerging Technology Lab, and she leads teams who are building breakthrough experiences in technologies like AR, XR, robotics, future internet, and much more, and began her career as a software engineer. She co-founded the Moringa School, a network of tech education programs in Africa, and helped pioneer emotion AI for mental health in collaboration with Dr. John Gottman. Her work has been recognized by MIT, Forbes, and the World Economic Forum, and she's spoken at South by Southwest, the MIT Media Lab, Harvard, and Fast Company's Innovation Festival. She also advises on tech and creativity through Duke's Innovation Master's Program and Design Tech High School. Matt is the creative lead for AI and creativity research at Google DeepMind. He is the co-founder as well of Liquid Logic, an art collective focused on AI and human creativity. He has more than 20 years of experience working at the frontier of emerging technologies and storytelling, and his background spans interactive video, connected objects, augmented reality, and now, of course, generative AI. And he's collaborated with organizations from all over the world, renowned artists, to reimagine digital experiences, and that work has received many accolades. Emmy Awards, Cannes Lion, Clio Golds, Webby Awards, Tribeca Film Festival Awards, the list really does go on. Currently, he teaches augmented creativity at Columbia University and delivered the inaugural AI and filmmaking masterclass at Columbia in 2024. He's a guest lecturer at NYU, Parsons, and FIT, and a frequent speaker at global events like South by Southwest, Cannes Lions, Forays, Create Tech, and Spikes Asia. And to all of this, he brings the lens of a truly global citizen. He was born in the French Alps, has lived in Rio, Montreal, Paris, and now is based in New York City and holds master's degrees in cultural studies and marketing and communications. So now I'm very excited. I think this is going to be an amazing discussion, and I'm excited to sit back and pick up my proverbial popcorn and hand it over to you, Savannah, for what I'm sure is going to be an interesting conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mina. Matt and I were talking, and we basically meet up like a couple times a year and just have conversations about what we're thinking about. And a lot of the time that has to do with AI, creativity, emerging technology, creativity, and kind of where things are headed. And so we're hoping that this time that we'll spend together is kind of just opening up that conversation to more folks. So very happy to be here. And to kick us off, Matt, will you share a bit more about your personal creative background and what inspired you to get into your line of work?
Sure, yeah. I mean, first, hi everybody. Thanks for joining today, and I'm very excited to be here. I remember 15 years ago discovering IDEO and the IDEO, and so it's exciting for me to be here today. It's kind of closing the loop. Going back to my background, well, I didn't go to any kind of school for creativity. I'm actually a self-taught creative, but I started working with design, with art and video about like I think 23, 24 years ago, back in the French Alps, where I'm from. We had that moment where we had a lot of illegal rave parties, underground rave parties, and it was a real cultural moment. People living in trucks came from UK, started spreading through Europe with their sound systems and playing very loud music. And somehow I fell into that scene and became instantly fascinated with it. A very cyberpunk type of aesthetic and vibe. And quickly, I realized I didn't want to just be a participant, dancing. I wanted to be an actor of it, and be part of it. And so, while all my friends were DJs and making music, I thought maybe I should do something else. And I started doing visuals, and I started doing VJing, in the early 2000s, manipulating videos with MIDI controllers, starting doing design for the flyers, and that's pretty much how everything started. And from there, it's a very long story. I don't know if I should go through every single steps today, but I just realized that I could continue my kind of regular studies, which I think Nina mentioned was more in the space of cultural studies and political science and business. But I also just started doing a lot of video art. Fell in love with the idea of technology and art, and and the aesthetic of it, and this idea that we had new brushes, new tools called computers, called controllers. And that with that, we could create a whole new language. So it's kind of really pretty much where it's all coming from. And fast forward more than 20 years later, this is where I am today. I made a career, I made a specialty of really trying to figure out how we apply very early research and frontier technology like such as Gen Video in order to tell stories, in order to make creative things with I think at the heart of it still that very important point, which is ultimately it's about the humans and it's about human expression. It's about telling human stories. And I say that because I think we are at that critical moment with AI where we're wondering what does it mean to be human in an age of AI. And that's what I care about is like ultimately how do we augment the human with those tools? And it's going to keep happening. I think there's a lot coming in the next few years, but it's an exciting time to be in that industry.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things that I always appreciate about our conversations is that we both sort of sit in this in between kind of bridge person role between both being a creative and a technologist and trying to, balance both of those things and explore how they fit together and where it makes sense for them to intersect. Um, you talk a lot about AI as a tool for tapping into creative flow state that we all know and really crave. Can you tell me more about that and how AI has changed your personal creative process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, first, interesting timing. Yesterday, we just announced at Google a new tool called Flow. that is a kind of a one-stop shop for video creation. And I also talk a lot about what I call liquid content and this idea that we're moving toward a world where stories and creativity is becoming liquid. So I think there's a theme here, the theme of water and the theme of flow. Uh, Now back to this idea of state of flow. I mean, I mean, we're all using those different tools, LLMs like ChatGPT or Gemini, image tools, video tools. And I feel like those are tools who've been recently bringing a certain type of feedback, a faster feedback, and the ability to kind of explore faster, to iterate faster, that are actually really helping augment that state of flow. And, creativity is something very personal. This idea that we might be more or less inspired, but at some point when you reach that state of flow where you're focused and in a way inspired, that's where you make your best work. And there are multiple tactics. In my case, I actually like to use the app Endel to get more focused, or music, of course. And there are moments where you just feel right. And it feels right the way you design it, feels right the way you're writing. And I find that AI, in many ways, actually, that kind of like direct feedback and that ability to iterate faster has been helping me getting that state of flow more than before. You know, it's very personal. Some people will get in the state of flow by writing. I actually get in the state of flow by walking. I always love to have long conversations or even ideation while walking in New York City, where I live. But more recently with AI, I feel like we've been also finding new ways to kind of get in that state. And there's something very interesting here for me, which is this idea that AI as a tool, but also as a collaborator, can really in many ways, hopefully at some point, help us get in that state, will help us also maybe in the future understand how we all have different styles of ideation and adapt to it. So this idea that AI might bring to more personalized creative experience as a tool is also a space I'm very excited about.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I feel like because I work better with other people and I work better in my creative process with other people and I'm collaborating and I feel like the flow that you can get into using AI allows you to just kind of get into more of that mode of collaboration and feeling like you are moving with something and it brings us more natural interaction paradigms and I think that that's kind of a promising future for where things are headed. I think that we should name up front. Just tell us about liquid content. What is liquid content? Why does it matter? Because you talk so much about it.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Well, liquid content is a personal theory or framework, whatever you want to call it, that I've been developing for the last few years. The the context for me is really that with every new technological and creative revolution, the first thing we do is we try to recreate the existing, and then at some point we start to think about what's coming next. That happened, with the early days of TV is a good example where like the first TV shows were just a camera filming a radio anchor. And the first photographies in many ways were trying to recreate painting and so forth. And so I've been thinking a lot about what's next beyond film, beyond games, where we're going. And my hypothesis is that we're moving toward a world where stories and expressions are going to be generated in real time, a lot of them, maybe not all of them, and they are going to be customizable and personalizable based on the context of the audience. So that's what I call liquid content. This idea that pretty much all stories will have that kind of shape shifting nature. So what does it mean? It means, for example, you could watch a 45 minutes video and maybe you have not enough time, and AI could actually recombine a video and keep the intent by making it 20 minutes. Or you could watch a story on a mobile phone with like a portrait mode, but with the advent of AR glasses, the same film or the same story is maybe something you could step into as an experience surrounding you, an immersive experience. It could be the art direction. It could be the story itself. So that's pretty much that idea. It doesn't mean that everything gonna be liquid. I hope we'll still have shared experiences that are not transformed and personalized. It should be up to the artist, to the creator, but that's pretty much my view is that we're moving toward a world where we have much more of like an aggregated type of stories that will shift from interactive and video games to lean back to different screens, to different stories, to different durations, and it's probably going to redefine the way we engage with all of that. There's something interesting here also for me is that in a way, it's coming back to the origin of storytelling. If you look at history, 50,000 years ago, stories were verbal. And we have a lot of anthropological studies assuming that at the time, the shaman or the chef of the tribe will actually adapt their stories to the audience. That's how legends and myth will be created. It was information being passed upon generation and would adapt. But then with writing, with printing, with TV, we lost a little bit of that. Stories became more static. And it was good, it was a way to scale in time and space, but it was not adapting to an audience. And so with liquid content, I believe we might be able to get the best of both worlds. Stories that adapt to an audience, but also can scale over time and space.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's something really beautiful in just having a whole galaxy of potential creative outputs and being able to extend that almost in infinite ways. And I think that's really interesting from a, consumption perspective of being able to have many different types of stories and get to personalize those and explore those. How do you think that it also reshapes creativity itself from the side of a creator?
Now, it's a great question, and I feel it has a lot of implication. And just to be very clear, I'm not necessarily advocating for liquid content. I feel it's more just something I'm seeing happening,
Mm,
which has both potential great opportunities, but also might bring challenges that we need to look at and address. And there's, of course, that question of the agency of a creator. What does it mean? If your content is adapted to an audience, how do you keep your vision and your agency? The way I see this impacting the creator is that it might move in many ways the act of creation from the end content, kind of pixel perfect, everything is being defined, to maybe more upstream at the level of world building and system thinking. And world building, one of my favorite world, one of my favorite thing. It's a little bit like video games. In a video game, if you're a game designer, you define a lot of the whole world, the whole characters, and the way you engage with it. But then you leave to the gamer a space of freedom for them to interact with it. Well, I could imagine that that's probably what will happen with liquid content is like as a creator, as a storyteller, you would define your world, you define what's in it and how you can engage with it. You might say, well, I want it to be personalizable for this, but not for that. Maybe it's okay to change the length of my content, but I don't want to change the story. Here's my narrative arc. And so it's really, again, moving towards system thinking. I feel that's probably one of the way creativity is going to be impacted. And as I said earlier, it's very important to do it in a way that respects the artist or the creative intention. That's why I hope we're going to build systems that allow for that.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think as we get more into this, then it's about how do we make these tools more accessible and easier for people to use in the ways that they're really interested in using them and create that, infinite possibilities and create the access that will allow people to tell stories that are super interesting and new and fresh. Um, and the question that people always ask is just like, what tools are you using and where do I start? So something that we hear from creative leaders just all the time is that they have so many ideas and they don't know where to start or they're feeling stuck and they're just looking for tips and tricks and ways to really find momentum. Do you see AI helping people overcome that type of creative kind of paralysis?
It can be helpful. And, the second, I'm using both Google tools and non-Google tools. My actually number one tool is a pen and paper. I've been scribbling my whole life, and I love just to draw on paper and to write on paper. And there's still something extremely primal and efficient about not looking at a screen. But then when it comes to like where do I start with AI, well, not surprisingly, I recommend everybody to really learn how to use LLMs, learn how to prompt them, and not just asking questions, but really understand the way they think and what LLM react to, because it can be a very powerful tool. I give you a few examples. I use LLMs not to give me ideas. I don't think that's the right way to do it, but I try to use them more as like a critic of my own ideas.
Mhm.
So typically, I would use an LLM for deep research first. If I'm trying to dive into a topic, it's a great time saver. I want to write about the Alps. Well, help me understand the history of the Alps, and it will do that work of research for me, and then I can use that as context. Let's say then I have like a script or I have like a deck presentation. I would download my PDF, I would upload it then to an LLM, and I would ask it to give me a grade from 0 to 10 and help me understand how I can improve it. I never ever have 10 out of 10, right? It's usually start at 6, so it's helpful. How it can help you actually progress and get better. I also love to use LLMs actually to help me get unstuck, as you mentioned, by using it as a filter, applying creative methods. One example is I'm a big fan of Brian Eno's Oblique Strategies, which is a famous card games where when you're stuck, you pull a card and it will give you like an unexpected direction.
Mm.
Well, you can actually ask an LLM, hey, could you, using oblique strategies as a method, here's my idea, help me go in unexpected directions. I could go on and go on the LLMs, but then when I think about image tools, like text to image tools, tools like Imagine, by Google, but also Midjourney and others, it's an incredible inspiration tool when you're writing to kind of visualize something. You can do it for virtual scouting, you can do it for virtual casting. You can obviously, really explore what I call treasure hunting, just exploring new aesthetics and directions, quick prototyping. I spend my career trying to sell novel ideas, and it's hard to explain those. Well, pre-visualization is very helpful. And then ultimately video tools. We announced Flow and VO3 yesterday. Those video tools are becoming extremely powerful. It's really becoming something where you can control a lot more what is your output. Well, it's just a great way to bring an idea to life faster. I was quite frustrated most of my life, having too many ideas, not enough time to execute on them. Having those long lists of ideas that would just die because I would just give up or get lazy or just not having the time. And that's one of the things I really like with AI video. It doesn't replace live action. And to be clear, if you want to make like a short film or a feature film, it's a lot of work. It's not just like a prompt, but be able to very quickly visualize in video and tell a story is also awesome.
Right. And I think, like, with all of the announcements that we saw from Google yesterday, it showed us some of the pathway into the future of how these tools are evolving. And a lot of what I saw and was kind of reading into there was just more creative controls and really understanding what it is that creatives are needing as they go through their creative process and what's coming from past creative processes and then also what is being enabled from the existence of these new tools. So as we look forward, what's your vision for the next like 5 to 10 years in AI and creativity? I know things are moving so fast that it's
Mhm.
hard to predict, but with
I
so
know.
many possibilities, how do we move
Yeah.
forward?
I mean, it's moving so fast, as you said, that 1 year kind of feels like 5 years of the way the time used to go. Maybe in 2015, it's pretty mind blowing, and sometimes it's hard to track. It's my job to track the novelty, in that space, and even for me, it's like almost a full time activity. Uh, when it comes to the vision, I don't know where things are going. I'm just speculating. Those are hypotheses, but I know where I want them to go. And that's something that for me is very important. I think we need to collectively articulate what we want for creativity and AI. We know that the impact is going to be there. We know that it's going to bring a lot of transformation. But I think we should be also very intentional about what we think is right for creators, for society, and for culture. And I'm not hearing enough of that, honestly. I haven't heard yet someone telling me, hey, this is what we need. This is what should happen. So in my opinion, the starting point is we should build tools, we should build platforms, we should create processes, workflows, we should support projects that always keep the human at the center of creativity. The idea of civilization, human civilization, is that humans are the one defining and shaping the narrative of their lives. They are the one creating the symbols, and the norms and the stories they share. And I think it's important that continues. And so that's a vision I want to push for. I think we need to articulate it all together. I want 5 years from now to live in a world where human plus machine together bring more values with the human at the center than machine alone. I think it's very important not to push for solutions or direction that will pretty much just automate everything. It doesn't mean you can't automate some of the time consuming aspects of it, but I hope we can build tools that will augment the human creativity. And I think if we do it well, it could honestly be a new creative renaissance. That's my hope.
Definitely. I'm super aligned and happy that, you as a creative and somebody who really values and prioritizes creativity is kind of in the room and helping to shape some of those conversations. And I think that's from my perspective, it's really important that artists and makers are deeply involved in exploring and shaping technology. And there's a long history of that. This is not the first time that artists are brought into the room, but so often design is the tool that's used to figure out what future technologies actually can be useful for as they kind of come out of R&D labs. And it's always important that the people who are making the tools and the people who are using the tools are more overlapping in each other's worlds and having really healthy dialogue and respect for one another about how things might evolve. Um,
I think that's critical. And we you talked about being a bridge, and I think being a
mhm,
bridge between the underground and the mainstream, being a bridge between technology and creativity, being a bridge between tech companies and society is critical. And that's pretty much the mindset we're following at Google DeepMind, which is if we want to build the best models, we need to work with the best artists and the best creators and the best filmmakers and hear from them what they need and what they want. And film, which is filmmaking, is one of my big focus now. In many ways, it's been the history of the relationship between technology and storytelling.
mm,
Film, as you might know, was invented by two French brothers, the brother Lumiere in Lyon, not far from where I'm from. And those people were engineers, they were not creative. And the first films were not that good creatively, but then people like Méliès and others, came and invented a new language. Those were the artists. Méliès was a bit of an illusionist, right? And so I think we're in a similar situation now where in AI labs, you have incredible researchers, fantastic, extremely smart people who are building those tools. And I believe that the best way for them to help expand those tools is to work with the people who understand and who can nurture that language of creativity and story. And those are the artists and those are the filmmakers and so forth.
mhm. Yeah. And as we think about like who, as the tools are kind of rolling out, um, what are some ways that leaders can just continue to experiment with AI today? Where would you encourage people to kind of get started? And what are some of the more fun possibilities that you're seeing?
By making things, uh, it's one of the thing I find interesting with AI is that in many ways, first you can't cut corner, right? You can't just read about it and think you understand it. You can't just play with it a little bit and think you understand it. A lot of people are, they know how to use ChatGPT or Gemini, but if you don't go deep and spend significant amount of time with it, I don't think you'll truly develop that kind of new understanding how to engage with machine and AI systems. Two, something I found very interesting, at least for me, with AI, is that in many ways my work was the work of an executive creative director, where I would very rarely make things myself anymore. I would tell other people what I need. I would share vision. I would provide feedback. My job was a lot about that, vision setting and feedback. And very rarely, I would not be the one designing the interface or shaping the 3D model or coding the page. And with Gen AI, that's something I really loved is that I've been back into using the tools myself heavily.
Mm,
I was prompting myself some of the assets that were used to announce yesterday, VO3 and Imagine 4. And so we see that a lot. People who are senior, mid-career to senior, between 35 to 45 plus, who used to provide a lot of feedback. Well, now they provide feedback to AI and they are back into designing themselves and they are going deep into using those tools. And I think that's critical. I think it's healthy. You're not outsourcing creativity in many ways. And in many ways also, I feel this people have a lot of advantage. If you know how to provide feedback, if you know how to articulate a vision, if you know how to articulate an idea, it is going to be easier for you to use AI because you know how to use language to bring something to life.
Tell us more about some of your other favorite experiments that you've seen out in the world. I feel like you get so much exposure to just things that are happening and creativity from all over the world, and it seems like it finds
Yeah.
you at this point. So,
I mean, there are a lot I could talk about, but there's an example, for example, from a colleague I meet. He's at the Creative Lab. He's a he's a creative technologist director at the Google Creative Lab, and he recently took a prompting guide. Google published a prompting guide, 60 pages, prompt engineering. It's kind of dense, and he actually using what we call vibe coding, like kind of just using an LLM to develop quick software. He turned that prompting guide into a small kind of like pixel art game with a quiz. And for me, that was super fun. This idea that you could turn now education into a game very quickly. He literally just uploaded that PDF to Gemini. He asked it to turn that into a game. He gave it some instructions, and at the end, you had that link. You could click on and you could play, and it will quiz you. And for me, that's great because back to liquid content, I think education is going to be a huge space where customized education is going to be awesome. I believe not everybody has the same way of learning. Some people are visual, some people are auditive, some people need short bursts of stimulation, some people need deep concentration. Well, for me, that's a great example of how dynamic software, dynamic content might adapt to that. I'm also excited by people who are combining mixed media with AI. One example is Chinese female artist called Junnie Lo. We actually just released a collaboration with her yesterday, and she's been combining AI-based content with what we call Gaussian splats. Gaussian splats are like those kind of 3D photogrammetric video experiences. And so she's not just making an AI video, she's combining it with live action, she's combining it with like Gaussian splats, and it creates a very unique aesthetic. Her name is Junnie Lau, Lao, sorry. And that's great, because she's not feeling constrained to just one media. She's experimenting, she's taking risk, and I think that's what we need now.
definitely, I think that's what it's all about is kind of exploring and pushing and seeing what the boundaries are and what's possible and how things are going to evolve into the future.
Yes, and taking risk. I think it's a great time to take creative risk because I know there are a lot of open questions around AI, and it comes with opportunities and challenges. But one of the opportunities is that ability
Hmm.
to take more risk and to
Right.
make mistakes faster, and that for me is very precious.
Right. Definitely. I think that's the heart of so much of creativity and so much of what really ends up pushing the boundaries and showing us the things that, society really needs to see, which is what art at its core does. And I appreciate that you also talked about education and, it's not these tools are not just about creating entertainment, they're also about creating tools that will help people learn and grow and move farther faster and there's so many possibilities for them. Um, and with that, I can't believe it's already been half an hour. Mina, come on in.
It goes so quickly, doesn't it? I was just riveted. So I've written like 4 pages of notes just from this short time together. This is amazing. Um, and I think that one of the things that struck me so much in this conversation is that as humans, I think, at least a lot of the conversation that I have heard is it feels so binary. It's all doom and gloom, or it's all sort of like tech naivete and happiness. But to me, what came out of this conversation is just the true like spectrum of opportunities that is at our doorstep. It's so incredible. And that we should take the agency to shape some of that future. That was such a inspiring message to me in some of this conversation. So I want to remind everybody. I know I've seen people dropping questions into the chat, so we will get to Q&A in a moment. But before we do, I wanted to try and summarize some of the takeaways from this amazing conversation. We covered a huge amount of ground, so I'm not even going to pretend to be able to cover everything. But a few things that I took away from this. Um, that is as creative leaders, it's really important that we don't think about generative AI and LLMs and the tools at our disposal just as a way to optimize volume productivity, which I think is the way a lot of creatives think about it currently. One of the things I found inspiring was this idea of reducing the time from idea to manifestation and thinking about productivity and the number of things that you might be able to truly manifest and bring to life, which I thought was incredible. That we could consider AI as a storytelling medium as opposed to just a tool for making things. So, really evolving stories in near real time and thinking about um, it as a way of adapting storytelling, but also at scale, which is amazing for us. And then from a prototyping perspective, thinking about it as a way of, through things like virtual scouting or casting and even through vibe coding to some degree, this idea that we can make richer, smarter, faster prototypes that help people see the vision of what we're trying to do is a real possibility. And and this idea that AI is really an opportunity is often the intersection of emerging technology and creativity has been for technologists and creatives to be more in each other's worlds. And so that we can see creatives as operating a little bit as translators between technology and culture for all of us. Um, there's more. There's the whole idea about world building and system thinking in the upfront, I think is really incredible. But I probably should get to questions from the audience at this point. But thank you. That was such a rich, amazing conversation. Okay, so questions from the audience. From Paul, I have a basic conundrum. A large part of the satisfaction and joy from creativity comes from the fact that it's difficult. So is it always desirable to move to where it's easy using AI?
This is a great question, and
It is.
I mean, yeah, so I mean, first, I using AI should be a choice, right? And that's my first point. And if there are ways of finding satisfaction without AI, this is fantastic, and there's no reason for you to change, as long as it works for you. Two, I think around difficulty, there are like some difficulties I would rather get rid of, and some maybe I may want to keep. Some of the difficulties, in my opinion, I'm really just speaking about myself. Some of the things are like literally laborious small things that I might do in let's say, an editing software that have little value or satisfaction. Well, those maybe I would want to use AI to do it. And then there are others, that are things that are challenging, maybe around the thinking, around the writing. And if you find validation or happiness or even expression in it, you should keep that. Ultimately, creativity is at its best when it comes with constraint. That's for me the theme of creativity. There's nothing worse than having no constraint, just like a blank page. And what
Right.
do I do? And very often the best ideas when you come with constraint. And so I'm not advocating for the absence of constraint, more of the opposite. Actually, you can use AI to create constraint for you. One of my favorite exercise in constraint was a French book, I believe written in the 50s or 60s. In the French name was like the disparition, the disappearance, and the writer wrote a whole novel without using the letter E, which is crazy. It's like the ultimate constraint. In French, like in many languages, the letter E is everywhere, and there was a choice. And so back to AI, I actually think we still have constraints, and actually in many ways, the aesthetic of AI is organized around those constraints. One good example was like there's a reason why you have a lot of short traders right now is because it's hard to make very long stories with consistency. Those being solved quickly. But you can also actually ask, so there are constraints, there are new constraints, but you can also create constraint by yourself. You can ask an LLM, hey, I want to go into that story direction and I want your help to come with new constraint for me. I want maybe you to create persona that are going to be in a way a constraint of the audience. Or maybe the way I ideate, I want you to almost be used as a coach or as a guardian that will prevent me from going into one direction. You can make it almost a playful collaboration. So again, back to the original question, I think constraints are good, limits are good, but they are the ones that are augmenting creativity, empowering it, and they are the ones that are honestly just labor intensive, time consuming task. And those are probably the one where we'd rather use AI to replace. And also, I don't think everybody wants the same constraint. That's a personal decision.
I I love all of that, and the way that we've been talking about that, and specifically Michelle Lee, who runs IDEO's Play Lab, has been talking about designing for friction.
Mhm.
And I was in a workshop with her a couple days ago, and she had us play this game where she was like, "Okay, take this pen and pass it," or it was a Sharpie because it's IDEO, but I got my IDEO branded Sharpie. It was take this Sharpie and pass it back and forth and do that for, a minute. And then she said, "Okay, now take this Sharpie and pass it back and forth, but you can't use your hands." And had us do that for a minute. And she was like, "Okay, which one was more fun?" And obviously the second one was so much more fun because we were using our feet and we were coming up with all sorts of kind of different tools. And I think that in this space, when we design for friction and the fact that the tools are kind of still evolving and sort of have this quality to them that like doesn't always give you exactly like what's in your mind's eye means that we're creating new types of creative friction that are really interesting and allow us to like have outputs that are totally different than what we expect. And I think that's a beautiful part of these tools and a really novel part of these tools. And it's kind of a natural evolution of how that shows up in a, non-AI creative process.
I love
I think
that.
there's a lot of joy in friction, actually, and, I used to when I worked with a lot of creative teams, I would say that sometimes the best ideas come out of friction. So I think that you're right. The idea is not to reduce it necessarily so that it's non-existent, but actually find the best ways of using it. Um, I can't believe this, but we are actually only going to get to that one question before we close out. So that's okay. It means that our second episode of Q&A with the two of you is going to be really, really rich. So I'm going to pivot away from our Q&A and ask the both of you one last question. We ask it of all our guests, and I'll give you a couple of moments to think about it, which is, what advice would you give to your younger self? And while you contemplate that, I'll do a quick closeout. To everybody on the call, if today's conversation sparked your curiosity and you're eager to go deeper into the intersection of AI and creativity, I invite you to check out two great learning opportunities from IDEOU. We have an AI and design thinking certificate. It is a flagship. I can't say the word flagship. Sorry, our flagship 8-week course that kicks off on August 14th. It's designed to help you build a foundational design thinking practice and to use AI to unlock those capabilities. We also offer an AI and design thinking workshop series. It is a shorter hands-on experience that begins June 2nd. And as we heard earlier in the show today, the best thing to do is to get in and use some of these tools and really become a practicing person in these tools. It is perfect if you're looking for those practical ways to start experimenting right away. And you can actually learn more about these and sign up for them at IDEOU.com. Remember, if you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen. And if you're up for it, please leave us a review because it does help other people find the show. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. We share invites to upcoming podcast recordings, new courses, and creative leadership resources. And finally, we will be sending out a recording of today's session along with a podcast link and a recap in the coming weeks. So keep an eye on your inbox. Okay, back to the two of you. Matt, you go first.
Uh, Great question, tough question, but I would probably give two advices, which I think goes together. The first one, and it's an advice I was given by one of my mentor in my late 20s. It's show, don't tell. I think as a creative, it's probably the number one advice I give any younger creative or a creative leader or person who want to use creativity in their life is, especially when you're younger and you're trying to build your confidence and you might be having imposter syndrome and feeling stressed about it. Well, show work, make things. It will, it's worth 1,000 words. Don't try to tell people your XYZ, just show them. And that's the right way, focus on your portfolio, focus on like really showing the world what you can do. And the kind of related advice I would give people is don't wait for the perfect brief. If people don't give you the brief you wish you had, if you're not getting the opportunity you think you deserve or you think will help you shine, well, write your own brief. And that's something I applied in different moment of my careers where either I was finding I was not getting the freedom or the projects I wanted within my corporate setup, Or maybe, we all have like high and lows, and when we go through lows and maybe we think like everybody's shit's pretty much and it's terrible. And those are moments where I use those side projects or personal projects to actually tell the stories or tackle the problems I just cared about. So show don't tell, write your own brief if you're not getting the right brief. And ultimately, try to build your portfolio, because I think that's what will get you noticed and help you stand out. Because over time, this will compound. And if you do that every year, well, after 10 years, after 20 years, you have a lot to show, and it will be better than any resume.
I love that. How about you, Savannah?
Yeah, I would say that's also good advice for managers is write briefs for people and really try to see your people as people and write the briefs that are going to help them explore their own creative edges. That's something when I was project leading at IDEO that I started to do towards the end is I would kind of look at all the individuals on my team and I would say like, here's the thing that really will like bring out the best in this person, and that's what I want them to run after. In terms of my younger self, I would say one is that, like, uh, don't think that just because you're, like, unfamiliar with an area, like, it's like, "Oh, I've never, like, used AI before," or, "I'm new to emerging technology," or, "I'm new to whatever space." Just don't think that because you haven't done something before that it's not for you. I think that more than anything, especially in the emerging tech space, it's important that folks have a voice and get to do that exploration, so things are for you, even if they're not something that you've done before. And the other one I will give, because Matt gave 2, is, going for some level of generalism. I think it's great to, like, go deep in some specific areas, but getting to have multiple methods of creative practice or, methods of ways of working and stuff like that will allow you to go a lot deeper and have more expansive ideas about what it is that you're trying to make. So pushing for some level of generalism, is a great way to go.
Excellent advice. Thank you both so much for being with us today. And thank you, everybody who joined the show. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next time on Creative Confidence.